Welcome back. Turtle Mountain Community College celebrated 50 years of educating the public today. Crystal Quao headed to the Turtle Mountains to learn more about the school's history.
Marshall LaRock, a Turtle Mountain Community College alumni with a 4-year degree in the Anishinaabe language, came to Belcourt Thursday to celebrate the history of his alma mater.
Every time you come to something like this, you hear new stories about our community, the history, how it was built.
Lancelot Ager, one of several founders of the college, says they started the school from scratch. They operated wherever space was available. They even began teaching classes in high schools at nighttime. Ager says anytime a building in town was abandoned, they took it.
There was a laundromat across the road that became our vocational building, our welding building, and then there was a post office that converted to a bar, became our Arrowhead Printing.
Zelma Pelchi, tribal councilwoman and former teacher at the school in its early years, says they didn't have decent buildings.
We had a flood, and the basement there at the old hospital flooded, and oh my goodness, it reeked of fuel oil.
Over time, issues with funding and facilities improved. Donna Dubois Thomas has been employed at the school since 1981.
When I worked for the Indian movement, American Indian movement, I knew they were making history too, but left and came here, and so it's history.
After Donna's first 3 years, it was accredited as a college. They were previously known as an enrichment center.
For us at Turtle Mountain, we were already Turtle Mountain Community College.
Thomas says she's seen one generation after another graduate from the school. In the Turtle Mountains, I'm Crystal Quao, reporting for your news leader.
Now, the school began with 90 students in its first classes, and now between 500 and 600 students are enrolled on average.